If you've been following along on the Corolla rescue, you know we replaced the pads and rotors. We didn't delve into it too deep, so I decided to do a little how-to. The first thing we're going to need are some new pads and rotors. Be careful when ordering online. Most online parts stores will send you front-wheel drive pads even if you specifically purchase rear-wheel drive, and they don't fit. Make sure it says Sport SR5 or GTS. This is what I bought. While the car is still on the ground, go ahead and loosen the lug nuts. If you have someone working with you, you can always have them hold the brakes if you already have the car jacked up. I'm working solo, so I have to do it this way. This is a slotted jack pad, or some people call them pinch weld pads. With it, you can jack up your car properly and not endanger the health of your pinch welds. They're $7 on Amazon. Go buy 2 before you start. I've had mine for years, so they are a good investment. Now jack up the car. Check out how the pad fits around the pinch weld and doesn't bend it flat. You should keep one with your floor jack and the other in your trunk. Because I don't want any surprises, I'm going to go ahead and use a jack stand. Now remove the lug nuts. Gun them off if you have an impact. Take off the wheel and set it aside. The Corolla has been sitting for a while, so I'll knock the dirt and critters off real quick with a brush. Cut the wheel to the side you're working on so you have better access to the back side of the caliper. There's one 12mm bolt holding the caliper to the bracket. Remove it. The caliper should now swing up on the pin that it floats on. Mine? Not so much. I'll have to use a pry bar to coax the caliper off the pads. Slide the caliper off the guide pin and use a S-hook, a wire clothes hanger, or a zip tie to hold the caliper up. Don't let it hang by the hose. That's just bad form. Remove the 2 17mm bolts that hold the caliper bracket. When you remove it, try not to let the brake pads fall out. If you don't have the factory manual, you want to take some pictures of how the pads and the hardware attach to the bracket. It's not as straightforward as it looks, so take a lot of good pictures. Straighten the wheel out so we can work on the hub. Use a screwdriver to pry off the bearing dust cap. I used a rubber mallet because mine had probably been on the car for 30 years. Straighten the legs on the cotter pin. Pull it out and set it aside. Remove the castellated nut cover. Remove the wheel nut and washer. Pull the hub straight off the spindle. Remove the bearing from the hub and put it with the other parts. We're going to apply a lot of force to the rotor bolts. I can't hold the rotor and twist the bolts out, so I'll bolt the hub back into the wheel. This just makes life a whole lot easier. Use a big breaker bar to crack those rotor bolts loose. You can finish off the job with your battery-operated friend. And because the rotor's been on the hub for about 30 years, I'm going to have to use a little pry bar action to get it to turn loose. And while you have the impact in your hand, go ahead and remove the hub from the wheel. My hub has a lot of grease and grime on it, so I'm going to hit it with a wire wheel to clean it up a bit. It's time to put the new rotor on the hub. It's pretty straightforward, so I'll just shut up and let you watch in peace. Don't forget to torque the bolts up to 47 foot-pounds. I had to bolt the hub back into the wheel to do it. We put the hub back on the spindle opposite of how we took it off. Slide the hub on the spindle. Put the bearing and washer on. Thread the nut on and adjust it according to the service manual. It's a long drawn-out process that entails tightening the nut, then loosening the nut and using a spring scale to test the force needed to turn the hub, and yada yada yada. Put the castellated nut cover on, aligning it with a hole in the spindle. Put the cotter pin in and bend over the legs. Tap the dust cover back on with a mallet. Easy peasy. Turn the wheel again for access to the back side. Take the brake hardware off the bracket. Replace one piece at a time if you're putting new hardware on. If you're reusing your hardware, take a lot of pictures so you know how to put it back together. Give the old hardware a good cleaning. Put the caliper bracket back on with the two bolts and torque them to 34 foot-pounds each. Swap out the hardware if it's being replaced and put the brake pads in the caliper bracket. The little metal tab on one of the brake pads should go in the inside bottom position. At this point, the caliper needs to be put back on so it can swing down when the brake pads are in the bracket. But before that, the piston needs to be pushed back into the bore. I use a cheap tool for the job, but you can use a C-clamp too. You can use an old brake pad on top of the piston so you don't have to do a bunch of extra winding on the tool. I'm using copper grease to lube up the guide pin so the caliper glides smoothly. And I put a dab of grease on the back side of one of the glide plates because he kept falling out. Slide the caliper on the guide pin and leave it in the upper position so we can pull it down over the pads once they are both in. With both pads in position, pull the caliper down. Put some copper grease on the caliper bolt and torque it to 14 foot-pounds. Straighten the wheel up one more time. Reinstall the wheel and snug up the lug nuts. Lower the car back onto the ground and then torque the lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds each. Remember to check the torque specs for your model and year. Changing the front brakes on your Corolla isn't a huge job. Just get it on an afternoon to do the work, and if it takes less time, you can always give the car a good wash. If you like these tutorials, don't forget to subscribe and give them a thumbs up.